So excited to dive into another pre-symposium panel. So, the pre-symposium is a lead up to our executive symposium on April 23rd in Houston, specifically at McLaren of Houston, where we will be discussing the topic leading change through experimentation, building a culture that adapts. Essentially, what we recognize is that being in a leadership role can be a lonely place sometimes, and that as the world we are in is constantly changing, whether it be from AI or technology or new processes or new systems, experimentation is critical. And the ability to adapt to new changes is also critical. So we've got two great leaders with us here today. We've got Claudia and Suzanne to share their thoughts, their insights, their perspectives on this topic. Claudia, do you mind introducing yourself?
Sure. So my name's Claudia Camacho. I am the head of HR for Cavis Energy out of Houston. We do service throughout the state of Texas, Oklahoma, and southern New Mexico. Before that, I worked for several Fortune 500 companies, to include Charter Communications, recently out of El Paso and San Antonio. Recently moved to Houston, absolutely loving Houston. I'm in love with Houston. A little bit on my private side, I do have four adult children, three sons, and my youngest is my daughter. And a beautiful, amazing, can do no wrong 11-year-old grandson that drives me absolutely insane, crazy with love. I also serve on the Girl Scouts board for the Girls of the Desert Southwest, which is all of West Texas, down into southern New Mexico. And I also serve on the Texas SHRM board as a district director to the 5 out of 32 SHRM chapters that the great mighty state of Texas has. And I also serve on the Texas bar as a committee member for any type of grievances or any reviews on that end. And again, Garrett, thank you so much for having me here. And Suzanne, it's amazing to be on this panel along with you.
Likewise, I'm super looking forward to it, Claudia.
Suzanne, how about you?
I'll go. Suzanne Grover. I am a native Austinite. I've been in financial services for 26 years. I like to say I'm a recovering underwriter, but I grew up mostly in varying levels of leadership in life insurance underwriting, with some side quests into VP of operations roles. So a lot of operational experience as well. Currently, I work for a company called Coastal Wealth, which is the #1 agency serving primarily Mass Mutual. It's a financial service advisory organization, and I run the underwriting and operations for them. It's very exciting, although it's the smallest of the companies I've worked for. So a lot of learnings over the last 18 months, and I am really, really pleased to be here as always, Garrett. These are really valuable.
Amazing. And I'm Garrett. I'm the founder and CEO of Ambition in Motion. At Ambition in Motion, our vision's a world where the vast majority of people are excited to go to work. When they are there, their expectations meet reality, and when they come home, they feel fulfilled. We believe that starts with leaders because leaders create the experiences employees have while at work. And so we create technologies and communities to empower leaders to be their best selves for their teams. And one of the ways that we build community is by putting on these executive symposiums where we bring a relevant leadership topic that we're going through and discussing, and create a safe place for other leaders to come to and share their challenges, share their successes, and ultimately share their learnings about how they're handling it. So let's dive in. Topic is leading change through experimentation, building a culture that adapts. I'd love to just kick this off with just this notion of experimentation is always so interesting and tricky because I don't know. I feel like sometimes some people or leaders don't necessarily know where the boundaries are. It's like, is it the world open and we're just trying to experiment and create anything that can be possibly created here? Or like, are we just talking about a very finite walls, or are there no innovations? Like and sometimes you see things where there'll be like messages on the wall, like innovation or experimentation or adapt or whatever. But it's like, what does this actually mean for our culture? So the first question that I'll kick this off with is, how can, as leaders, especially if we're trying to instill experimentation and try new things, how can we do a better job of laying out the parameters of what we're looking for, what we're expecting as an outcome, and ultimately put people in a position where they know what our expectations are? So Who'd like to go first?
Sure, I can go first on that. I think, first of all, is providing that psychological safety, right? You've got to be able to provide that to your employees where they feel safe to experiment. They feel safe to fail, right? And they feel safe to also win, because winning can also be very scary for someone, because you win an initiative, a project, and what next, right? How am I going to come up with the next great idea, or how am I going to sustain the project that I just pitched and got awarded to? So that I think psychological safety, and again, coming from the HR side, right? That's always going to be important. But I feel whether you're in HR operations, running the business, sales, that brings that security where I can think outside the box as an employee, and I'm not going to be reprimanded, or no idea is a bad idea on that.
And I want to build on that and push back just a little bit because I've been working a lot with my executive coach at Ambition in Motion around the concept of psychological safety. And one of the things that has become really evident is um, there has to also be accountability, right? So psychological safety is really, really important. We shouldn't be punishing failure or proactivity, but and I wouldn't say we punish anything, but there does need to be accountability to whatever process has been built around. And that requires backing up a little bit, there can't be psychological safety if you don't know what the parameters are, what the guardrails are to begin with. So I think we need to hold teams and leaders especially to whatever the process is, to having the discipline around the process we've built. But with experimentation, especially, it's not just throwing darts, right? There has to be an actual process to this. It becomes actually more critical to be disciplined when you're experimenting, lest it just become kind of, Garrett, what you mentioned earlier with the free for all. So it's a lot easier to build psychological safety within confines of whatever the process is. But we also have to recognize that it is still okay to hold people accountable at every level of the organization within whatever those processes are.
I really like these points. I've got a funny version, but also a second real version of this. Have either of you seen the TV show Silicon Valley? It was a
Yes.
TV show on HBO from like 10 years ago. If not, I'll give the premise. Uh, this guy, his nickname in the TV show was like Big Head, and he was a part of like the founding team of this technology, but he was not like the most important person. In fact, he wasn't really confidently or really competently paying attention to anything going on. Eventually, this company let him go, and this other company who was trying to copy the this new upstart company hired him, paid him a bunch of money to come in, and they said, "Big Head, you will get this whole department. You're just a genius. You're part of this genius team. We'll give you carte blanche to do whatever you want, make anything you want to, because like anything you touch is gold." So they're like, okay, 3 months go by. Big Head, what do you got for us? And this upstart company was creating like neural networks and internet stuff and all this sort of stuff. Well, Big Head created the fastest potato launcher there could possibly be. And so, like, they're shooting a potato out of this cannon and it just flies into this wall. And the CEO's like, why have we been spending all this money? What are you doing? Like, how could you not do this? Like, well, you said to just create anything I wanted to, and I just thought it'd be really cool to create a really innovative potato launcher. So obviously that's a silly version because it was scripted in a story, but in a more real version, I think of Pixar and when they were creating Toy Story 2, what had happened was they had such a blockbuster hit with Toy Story 1. It crushes it, and so they're like, okay, we're gonna make another movie. They took the entire creators who made Toy Story 1, they said, you're gonna create A Bug's Life. They go out and do it, but at the same time they got in this really prestigious director who had a ton of experience. They're like, okay, you're gonna take over Toy Story 2, you're a genius, you'll make it amazing, we trust you, we'll give you carte blanche to do it. Well, Bug's Life goes out, it crushes it, does an amazing job. Toy Story 2, on the other hand, it gets put in front of like the Pixar founding team, and they're like, this story doesn't follow at all. This is bad. And so they scrapped the entire movie and then had to put in guardrails around what needed to happen in terms of like success, like they called it the brain trust. So like every 2 weeks they'd have a meeting just to make sure things were on track and the story was following and tracking and all that sort of fun stuff. And so the point I guess I'm getting at with both of those stories is that what where do the guardrails come in and what does that look like? How can we lay out guardrails without stifling innovation? Does that question make sense?
Yeah. So I was just at a conference last week around the vast majority of it was kind of around how companies are deploying AI. So I think that this particular topic is really apropos, especially as a lot of organizations are sort of grappling with this technology. And one of the speakers said that actually took a picture of the slide was that people kept being like, well, it's really risky, and you've just got to be able to build a culture of, risk taking. Well, experimentation is not risk taking. It's risk management through small bets. That was the slide. And I think that's really, really true. And the point of that particular panel was around you have to have a hypothesis because if you're not working towards something, and you're not actually setting the expectation about what you expect to have happen, then you're not experimenting, you're guessing. You're really just throwing darts there. So I think every kind of one of these small iterations and these small kind of check and adjust cycles, if you will, really has to begin with, frankly, the scientific method, which I think step three is like build a hypothesis. And then, yes or no, it doesn't work. And your culture does have to be okay with that piece of it. But it's those are how you build the guardrails, these small iterations where you are measuring an outcome to what you expected, right? So I think that's the thing. And this is my kind of you always ask what is a popularly held belief that you don't necessarily agree with. And mine is that this kind of like culture of experimentation and culture of being adaptive and risk-taking, those aren't cultures. Um, Adaptability isn't a personality trait of an organization. It's a process. So if you start thinking about experimentation and adaptability as processes, it's a lot easier to A, provide psychological safety because now you have an avenue for people to drive down, if you will. And secondly, it's a heck of a lot easier to kind of determine success or failure, if you will, and what that next iteration should be.
Yeah, and I think going on with a little bit what Susan is talking about is you've got to align your experimentation into your strategy. Just
Mm,
like we implement our goals, our, strategic goals.
yeah.
You've got to align it with strategy. And going into, you're right, you can't have just this free for all, give me that potato launcher, version two. No, we're not doing that. It's got to be aligned. But within that strategy and within the process, we also have to create some kind of feedback loops or some kind of check balances on how it's going, right? So we're not sitting 9 months from now in that boardroom and we're saying, well, we just did version two of a product we never really needed, right? So it's that feedback loop with your leaders, with your executive C-suite and providing that those loops right throughout. Another one is it's got to sustain the culture, right? Your experimentation, as long as it sustains the culture of your organization, it's going to bring in that innovation that you want from whatever it is, whatever direction, whatever goal it is, whatever new innovative process or product it is that you want to bring along it's got to sustain your culture as well.
I think that is such an important point, Claudia. This concept of like these feedback loops, these decision loops, right?
Mhm.
It being very intentional in the process of
Correct.
what is it we were trying to achieve with this in the first place? And again, I go back to AI, right? It is very easy to get um, AI shiny toy ism. It's like my new favorite term I literally just coined out of my mouth. AI shiny toyism is, I think, a real temptation of companies to kind of really catch on to this AI train and want to be investing and want to do the right thing. And they kind of have an idea that they're just going to make things cooler, faster, better, stronger, and there's going to be some sort of magic ROI. But what the problem with AI is if you don't know exactly what you're trying to get at, and there is a systemic failure in the process, down upstream, then all you're doing is amplifying that issue faster and louder. And so I think we've seen that in a lot of these kind of AI failures, if you will, is there wasn't enough coming back to it in what you're saying, Claudia, right? We have to bring it back to the culture. What are we actually trying to do for our customers, our employees, our stakeholders? And if you're not asking that question confidently and consistently, and you don't have the discipline to hold on to that, then it's very easy for AI to just amplify whatever that problem was, as opposed to actually fixing it and addressing it as a solution. I apologize. I have a new employee that presents well, but sort of lacks focus. So excuse me.
No, this is really interesting. Claudia, you brought up this point of like soft psychological safety, making it a safe to fail. And we also talked about feedback loops and, sustaining the culture. And these are all things that like I'm roaming around in my mind and I'm thinking to myself, okay, in theory, this sounds great, but where do most companies fail in their whole process around that? And I think a lot of companies fail because they lack the discipline to not be firefighters. Does that make sense? It's like, hey, we're all about AI here. We support you. But oh my gosh, did you get this thing done? Did you get that thing done? Did you get this thing done? Did you get that thing done? Your task list gets pop, 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 pop. And then all of a sudden it's like, hey, but whenever you get free time, feel free to innovate with AI. We support you. And so the issue is we're not giving our people the grace to actually go out and innovate because we are talking out of both sides of our mouth. We're saying like, hey, I know you're working 50 something hours a week. Somehow, some way be more efficient so you can find some time to experiment. And so I guess the question I have is when we ask our team to experiment, how do you encourage companies to have the discipline to pull something off their plate so then there is the time to actually innovate? Does that question make sense?
Incentive. You have to align the incentives to that. And that takes an extraordinary amount of discipline. One that I'd say most organizations do not get right, regardless of size or industry. And Claudia, you're probably a little closer to this with just HR, but I think anytime we're doing something that kind of requires change management anyway, and we actually talked about this in the last pre-symposium panel that I was part of, Garrett, um, especially when it's coming down from C-suite, they want to see ROI as soon as possible. And if as an executive or a middle manager, you're not going to be able to provide the ROI, then there's sort of fear of there being some ramifications there, right? There has to be sometimes, especially with these small kind of iterations, it's not the ROI, it's what did we learn, right? You don't necessarily need it to be full success, but did you fail fast enough that we can do the next iteration? Did you fail thoroughly enough that we learned something from this? And if those are built into the incentive process and even any templates where you're doing report outs to the managing partners of these initiatives, if those aren't built in, then it's always going to come back to where's my revenue? Where's my expense savings? What happened to all the shiny things AI was supposed to do? And a lot of times with these initial iterations, that's very rarely the point. The point is just to kind of iteratively improve or fail forward fast enough that you can better refine your hypothesis for the next time. It's incredibly hard to do. We talked about this with the change management last time. There has to be built into change management, not just how you communicate and what the change is, but the pace of change has to be intentional, or you're going to risk the burnout of your high performers. You're going to risk the learnings that you were supposed to find anyway. And altogether, it's just going to be a bad time. That's my soundbite.
I
You're
think
going to have a bad time.
I think and going on the other side of that is sometimes as organizations, as us as leaders, is we forget the agility part of it. We've got to be very agile. And like you said, Garrett, how do I pull that weekly dashboard report I need from my engineer that I know takes two days for him to build and give it to someone else so he can concentrate on that? That's the agility part of it. And sometimes behind agility is the you feel you're losing that span of control right? Because you've got that control mechanisms within that, but we've got to be able to cut the red tape to provide that innovative part of experimenting with anything like that. We've got to be able to provide pilot projects within that and take away the duties and distribute among the rest of the team somehow and just find the time to do that, right? On that end. And behind all of that is that what I've come to see and I've come to experiment with, and me myself, getting out of my usual hole is it's a concept called leadership modeling. We've got to model our leadership in order to be able to provide that agility, that psychological safety, that feedback loops is stand away from it, look at it with a different lens, and then maybe implement those innovative processes that Amazon, Google, Etsy are doing it, right? They have experimentation within their DNA. How is it that they're able to do it and we can't? Well, it's going to be that ability to stand away from your standard forms of leadership and embrace new forms of a way of delegating the tasks within the
I
organ.
I saw an organization recently that had a plate, right? And you remember how when we were growing up, there were like food groups on your plate, and this much is your plate supposed to be fruit and vegetables, and then this is supposed to be meat, and this is supposed to be stuff you'll actually eat or that your kids will eat. Um, so they would do this with the plate, right? Like here is a person's plate of work. And for this project, we're moving that off so we can make room for this particular thing. But that was built into apparently every project sort of proposal that they would put forth to anyone, in a particular department, you had to do the plate method. So they thought through it to begin with. And that was one of the most like granular real world examples, because Claudia and I can sit here, all of us, can sit and talk about like building the culture and doing it differently. But this was an actual plate that we had grown up on as a model in elementary school. And I just thought it was really neat. And it just showed that is built into their culture. It was built in that we recognize that in doing this thing, we are taking the opportunity cost of this thing, and we have to find somewhere else to do that, or just choose to say, that's not going to be the priority right now, kind of depending on what was coming off the plate. If it was, a table stakes kind of deal, find somewhere else to put it. But if it was just, we've made a choice here not to do this project in lieu of trying this project, um, that was okay, right? It was just that it was an intentionality and it was a communication around that so that again, the employees, especially the frontline employees, had felt safe that they were not just getting piled on. Their plate wasn't getting bigger or more loaded up. It was just changing and they understood how it was changing and therefore how to prioritize their work. And that kind of feeds right back into that psychological safety Claudia was speaking about earlier.
Okay, so there's a few ideas. I've got a crazy. So first off, one, I love that you talked about that plate. I think that's something most organizations should use, but they don't. They just assume like, cool, well, get a bigger plate. And it's like that is not how that works. Time is finite. And
Yeah.
so but this concept of aligned incentives is causing me to have an idea, and maybe this is a really dumb idea, but I think there could be some merit here, or at least something relevant to it. Maybe it's wild, maybe it's crazy. But I think like when we're talking about creating true psychological safety and we're talking about true aligned incentives, we've got to acknowledge the elephant in the room. And the elephant in the room is the very real possibility that my job gets terminated because of an innovation that I created. That's a real possibility. It's happening. And even if it's not happening at your company, it's a fear that's going to be roaming around in the back of the minds of all employees. Like everybody's thinking about it. Because even if my company doesn't do that, and we are like, hey, everybody's safe, I see Amazon do that. I see this company do that. I see that company do that. And I think to myself, I know people who work there and I know they worked on AI and now they're gone. And so I have a crazy idea and maybe this is crazy. Maybe it doesn't make any sense. I don't know. But the part of me is wondering like can we acknowledge the real possibility that somebody's role could be outsourced because of an innovation they worked on, whether it be AI or something else? But could we also create some form of assurances for them from an incentive program. Like a salesperson gets a commission on a deal they close, and maybe they're no longer working at that company anymore, but like they still get commission checks or something like that. I'm not saying that's the case with how we could do it, but I wonder is there a way that we could say like, hey, if you create an innovation that ultimately makes your job non-needed anymore, for the next 3 years or whatever, we'll pay 5% of your salary to you, and that will be just yours because we created this innovation. And that's where like this is not a fully thought out idea. It's just like something I'm thinking of as we're talking, and I'm thinking to myself like, gosh, like that would practice transparency. That would be the ultimate in psychological safety because I know that okay, God forbid I actually do something that's amazing and drives efficiencies for the company, and for better or for worse, the company determines that I am not needed anymore. I have some semblance of like trust that I'm going to be taken care of if worse comes to worse. And at least this is acknowledged ahead of time. I don't know. Is that crazy? What are your thoughts?
Absolutely outlandish. No, I think we're all going to have to start thinking that way because it's here. We're going to start seeing kind of slow drains, and you'll see in particular industries first. There's a new book that just came out by a gentleman named Leandro Maya. It's called The Age of Abundance. Kind of talks through this a little bit on what you're touching on, in that everybody should be kind of slightly worried all the time about how AI is going to drastically revise or just reduce or eliminate their roles. It's coming for kind of all of us in that regard. And whether it's AI or just a process shift, right? Um, I think we'd be remiss in not speaking about it. I don't know the answer to that. I don't know that a lot of companies are going to get there. But you're right. If it's not going to be you creating that innovation and having a say so in how you could work alongside this innovation or make room for yourself, then another company is going to develop a solution and it's not going to have thought through your role in the organization. So I think I don't know if it's a financial incentive or a please have a seat at this table, so that we can sort of work through how you continue to fit in this organization. Maybe that's the incentive, but I think we'd be remiss in not coming up with those ideas as organizations. I don't. That doesn't as an employee, that doesn't necessarily make me feel safer, which is a catch 22, right? I don't know. That's going to be something I think most industries are grappling with over the next 3 to 5 years. I don't know if you're seeing that in HR, Claudia, already kind of come up with
Yeah.
just the the,
So
the, the kind of internal friction.
yes, it's here. Like you
Yeah.
said, it is here. It's in HR. I've seen it within HR teams as well, right? And I think, Garrett, going into your idea, let's think about COVID. Who would have thought we can work from home? Where did this idea come from, right? So no, it's not outlandish because I've seen crazy wild ideas. How can we send home 1,800 employees in a week to work from home? 2019, somebody would have told you that's crazy. Yeah, that you're insane. March 2020, you're doing it, right? So anything can happen, that can happen. It's just about introducing it. But going into the fear of AI and job replacement and am I going to be needed in the future? It's here.
Yeah,
Um,
maybe the messaging is have a
yeah,
seat at this table, right?
come
So that
on
we can start
in.
talking about how to evolve these
Exactly.
roles as
Exactly.
opposed to we'll pay you if you fix it, right?
Right.
Which there should
Or
always be part of that
correct.
too. It's part of
Or
incentive
what,
alignment.
yeah, or what is it that you like about what's coming down the
Mhm.
pipeline? And let's build your skills to that,
That
right?
right there.
And it's okay. And I was reading an article and I wish I could remember. And it was like a little saying that I don't want AI to write my book that I've been wanting to write all my life. I want AI to do my laundry. Right. So think of it that way. We're creating AI to do the mundane skills or the skills that maybe we don't like to do so we can concentrate in getting those skills we've always wanted to do at a higher level. Right? So we've got to start embracing AI in that way as well.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you brought that up because that's a part that like I see a lot of companies kind of pushing as like cool. Like at the end of the day, AI is here whether we like it or not. So you can be a part of the AI train or you could not be a part of the AI train, but we're at least paying for you to be a part of the AI train. So you might as well take advantage of the fact that we're paying you to learn and develop yourself. However, with that said, I don't know if like that's a little bit of assurances, but I do think that I don't know. Back to this, like I'm not saying I have it because I think like Claudia, you're thinking to yourself like this sounds like a paperwork HR nightmare of like having comp plans that are contingent on somebody creating an innovation with AI that makes this business more effective. But I do think like I don't know. There could be something that could be come up with. I mean, shoot, a salesperson gets a percentage of commission when they close a sale on something in a lot of cases. Can an innovation worker get a percentage of the efficiency created from, maybe it's a crazy idea. Like I said,
Yeah, that's a perfect idea. I think a lot of organizations do it, Garrett. I don't even know that that's pre-AI, right?
Sure.
This kind of almost like idea profit sharing thing. And I think some of the more sophisticated sort of 3M type cultured companies do that, right? If you're part of a project and it yields $60,000 a year in savings from whatever, you're bought into that for oh, $600. I don't know what the number is, but I think that all goes back. That's a very, to me, kind of simple alignment, incentive alignment, without a ton of HR problems. Sorry, my
And
employee thinks so
you're
too.
fine. Great employee engagement you've got going there, Susan.
Thank you. Yep.
And I
Absolutely.
think going back is, yeah, they may do something, what they do now is they get to trademark their new
Oh,
projects
yeah.
or their new products that they create or new systems. So that's another way of incentivizing them, Garrett, is allowing that trademark behind it and it's theirs forever on that end. So
I
again,
don't
they're
know if companies would go that far. Like I like the idea. I think like part of the, thing is like a company takes a risk on somebody to be in R&D. It's like they're paying for your salary for the potential benefit that if you do come up with something, it's the businesses.
yeah,
So I get that portion of it. I'm not like so crazy, but I do think there is I don't by the way, this is an idea that I have baked as we are having this conversation. This is no
This is
pre-thought to this
real-time
whatsoever.
innovation.
But it was just something that was going through my head where I'm thinking to myself like, man, how do we get a psychological safety and acknowledge like the elephant in the room? How do we go about maybe alleviating the fear? And like, how can we let people know like, cool, if worse comes to worst, you will and can get compensated for something. So I appreciate you teasing this idea out with me and letting me play with it because it's certainly something that I think as leaders we should be thinking about as we move in the future because if we don't acknowledge it, it just feels like we're gonna get a bunch of like silent thumbs up where people are like, oh yeah, boss, for sure, I'll work on that innovation thing. Like, nope,
Yeah.
I'm not doing any of that. I'm gonna do my job, and like, there's zero incentive for me to do that because I'm not protected on the other side.
right.
Yeah. Anyways, Claudia, Suzanne, great pre-symposium panel today. If you're watching this, you're like, I want to meet these two great leaders. Come to our executive symposium on April 23rd in Houston. We're hosting it over at McLaren. So if you like cool cars, I'll post the link in the comments on how to RSVP for this event. But anyways, I look forward to seeing you all there. Topic as a reminder, leading change through experimentation, building a culture that